I think somebody in this fandom needs to play devil's advocate, and I'm willing to take that responsibility. Now, the reason why I say that is because despite all their efforts to try and write a gray conflict, whatever the hell that means, the writers have made the blacks into the tragic heroes and the greens into the villains who want to steal the throne from the deserving queen because hashtag feminism doth not exist in Westeros. Alright? But that's not the point. The point is that the Greens are portrayed as the villains of the story, and even though they tried to make it more balanced by making Alicent more sympathetic, they made a complete moron of the strategy by giving the Blacks way too much regency and the Greens not enough. Now, I think the fandom thinks the Greens are the villains, which they are, but they have an equally good sense of ideas that the Blacks do in the story, and I'll get to it one by one. You see, for all the efforts of the Fat Man, in his attempts into writing morally gray conflicts, the Dan suffers from being the antithesis of the exact thing he's trying to do. You see, Gurm is not a big fan of the good versus evil story, which is why he thinks The Lord of the Rings is a bad story. I don't know if he thinks it's bad, he just thinks that morality is more often gray than it is black and white. Now that being said, he has a strange obsession with favoritism. And in this particular story of the Dance of the Dragons, his favoritism goes to the black side, which I think originates as a bias to, Daemon. However, he has favoritism in stories in general. He likes the Starks more than he likes the Lannisters, Blacks, Blackwoods, and the Brackens, things like that, right? Granted, in the books, Aegon and Rhaenyra are both universally thought to be awful people. Their actions signify their bad nature. However, when you zoom out a little bit, you see that Gurm has a pro-black bias, which I think originates, as I said, as a Daemon bias, alright, because he's in love with him. Alright, the cause is on the black side, the tragedies, a lot of them are on the black side, the will to fight, the cooler characters, all that sort of stuff is on the black side. That being said, however, whenever I have a conversation with book readers, they point out that the Greens have an equally justifiable cause. Right? And whenever I have a conversation about it with them, we get to the conclusion that, yes, both sides are awful. However, if you were to flesh it out, both sides have an equally justified claim to the reason why they're fighting. It's the show-onlys that I have a problem with, alright? And I want to start off with two characters for this video, because I feel like I go into way too much length, and 24 minutes frantically talking about Daemon Targaryen is a disgrace, alright? Even though I love his character. I'm going to begin with Otto Hightower. You see, Otto is a character who is looked at from a power-hungry perspective. That's the correct one, right? However, his relative comparisons to guys like Littlefinger or Tywin Lannister, or just generally, morally despicable people from the main series, is completely unfair. For one, Otto is completely unlike Littlefinger. You see, Littlefinger used his position to actively kill the realm, so that when it was at its rock bottom, he could ascend to the power, using his competence, and, chaos is a ladder, which is a fantastic line, by the way, right? He secures his positions through bribery and corruption, because after Lysa begs Jon Arryn to make him, master of coin, he bankrupts the realm by pretending to be a servant of the king. Alright? Then, he switches positions constantly. Right? He partakes in the killing of innocents, killing of high nobles, he goes from Starks to Lannisters to Boltons, whatever it is, right? His plan serves himself. Essentially, Littlefinger acts in accordance to his own position, sparing no consequences to get there. He betrayed Ned in favor of Joffrey, then he killed Joffrey to, secure his position, then he stole Sansa because of his creepy obsession with her, plus trying to secure the North. Alright? Otto, on the other hand, has worked for ambitions, but he doesn't do so at the expense of the realm. Otto Hightower has not corrupted the realm, bankrupted it, or anything along those lines. Alright, let's talk about it in a point of, chronological order. First of all, for majority of his rule as hand, he served the realm very well. He maintained the peace, did not let corruption make its way into the higher nobility, and didn't malign the name of the ruler. You see, Viserys' incompetence as a king is completely contrasted by the competence of his hands. Otto and Lionel are both fantastic at their jobs. Otto never partook in the killing of innocent people, alright? He never sanctions the murders of anyone needlessly, alright? He does ask Harold Westerling to go to Dragonstone and kill all the blacks, but that's a preemptive measure because Daemon would have done the same damn thing had he been in Otto's position, alright? However, that doesn't, of course, end up happening. Alright, Otto, despite scheming to put his blood on the throne, initially wanted the bonds met through marriage. He wanted Rhaenyra and Aegon to get married, but he was too young. Aegon, that is, not Otto. Still, his initial plan on getting to the throne was a simple thing. And it's not like the Targs don't do the inbreeding all the time anyway. Alright? Alas, the baby was too young, and nothing came of it. Alright? Granted, he only pushed for Rhaenyra to be heir as a placemaker until Aegon would be declared heir. Alright? And anybody who suggests that Viserys never intended to name his firstborn son heir has not been paying attention. Number one, alright, Viserys has been trying to get a male heir for years, so much so that his wife has gone through stillbirths and eventually ended up dying. Alright? Second, he hosted a tourney called the Heir's Tourney, meaning to signify that when indeed this kid was going to be born, he was going to be the heir. Third, though Vizzy never intended to marry again, he did, and the smart person would come to the conclusion that now you have a son, meaning that you would name him heir. Fourth, Otto never did anything out of the expected realm. Alright? He expected the firstborn son to be named heir, and his only fault in reasoning was that he misjudged the fact that Viserys wouldn't name Aegon heir. Alright? Those were his only crimes. Alright? Now, granted the fact that Otto isn't free of crimes. For one, his scheming and power-hungry nature did lead to the faction formation. Right? The Greens and the Blacks directly come from the fact that Otto wanted power and had Alicent married to him. Alright? Had he not pushed Alicent to marry Vizzy, which is a reason to dislike him, potentially, the realm wouldn't have been, split into two factions. Alright? But that's under a massive assumption. Because Otto isn't the only person who partakes in wanting to marry their daughter to Vizzy. Because Corlys Velaryon did the same damn thing, but with a younger daughter. Corlys and Otto operate on the same wavelength. Alright? They're power-hungry people who may not do morally despicable things, but still want to be the ones who come out on the top. Alright? Had Corlys gotten his wish, then the dance would have happened anyway, because now the question is about Laena's sons, Vizzy and Laena's sons, rather than Alicent. In this circumstance, even if we assume that Rhaenyra is married to Laenor, and they have their own kids, right? The question would eventually end up being, what the hell would Daemon do? And so long as he's unleashed and untethered, he will do some shit, alright? So there is no way he could have avoided war in any circumstance whatsoever. Otto getting his way just led to the different factions being formed. Maybe if the Velaryons would have been involved, it would have been called, the dragon versus the the seahorse or whatever the hell it is. Alright? Another thing that he does wrong is that he keeps a blind eye to the crime in King's Landing. Alright? It's obvious that he doesn't control the gold cloaks as well. He pays little heed to the crime, but he doesn't, use particularly police brutality to keep everybody in check. Because if I wanted to break everybody's legs, I would be able to do that, because I control the private guard of the city. Alright? Yes, of course. He, quote-unquote, pimps out his own daughter to marry a much older man for his own self-serving nature. And that's a bad thing to do. But in Otto's mind, Viserys is a decent, kind, and a generally good person. He has no reason to think that Viserys would harm Alicent. Now, of course, he in his mind thinks that he found Alicent a great match. Yes, that's a completely reasonable thing to assume, because unlike Daemon, Viserys isn't prone to having outbursts where he would domestically abuse his wife. Granted, of course, getting this Alicent married to Viserys in such a sneaky manner did mean that Alicent was devoid of a childhood, but, she would have been not having one anyway, because she's a nobleman's daughter, and she was going to get married to some old dude at some point in her life. Alright? However, he did eventually end up ruining the one relationship that Alicent made when she was at her loneliest, which is her friendship to Rhaenyra. Alright? He also doesn't really prepare Aegon to rule, even after he's appointed hand one more time. But I think that, for the most part, isn't really a fault of his, because so long as Aegon, Aemond, and Daeron are indifferent to ruling, the Green Council can do their job for them without having to indulge their dumbassery. Alright? For the most part, Otto is a schemer and a person who placed his ambition and his loyalty to his house before his loyalty to the crown, before his duty, perhaps. But that doesn't come at the cost of him neglecting his duty. You see, he doesn't do anything to make the realm, split in half. Obviously, he does it. What I mean is that he doesn't kill the realm actively, like Littlefinger does, or Tywin does. Right? I think the audience hates Otto because he's a rival to Daemon. But, to justify their hatred for him, they act like he's Littlefinger come again, even though Corlys does the exact same thing to, improve his status. And Corlys does it from a point of a petty feud because he's angry that his wife and son were passed over for being king or a queen. All right? He has played the game for his ambitions, Otto, pimped out his daughter, and then didn't prepare his grandkids. But credit where credit is due, Otto Hightower is a great politician and a very good hand for the realm. Another thing to mention is that Daemon and Otto are the opposite sides of the same coin. You see, they're both second sons who stand to inherit nothing, and anything that they get is, they have to get and fight for it. Daemon comes from the Targ supremacy angle, whereas Otto comes from the Hightower ascension angle. They both want control of the Iron Throne, but Otto does it more subtly, whereas Daemon is more brash and loud about it. The reason why the audience dislikes Otto is because he is the antithesis. The reason why the audience dislikes Otto is because he's an antithesis to Daemon, the rogue prince versus the tame tower. I can't come up with a good, nickname for Otto, but whatever it is, right? The Dragonstone scene is also very interesting because it displayed what kind of a person Otto is. Despite Daemon being in plain sort of rebellion, Otto goes to Dragonstone to bargain with him, right? He's deep inside enemy territory, all right? He's deep inside enemy territory, which is the king's ancestral holdfast, which has been practically stolen and occupied and fortified by an army of turncloaks, right? He's stolen the property that belongs to the king and has taken a second wife, going against the customs of the religion and the culture that they follow. All right? For all his faults, Otto is willing to risk everything to ensure that Daemon doesn't get to control the narrative with his overtly pushy ways. The only reason why we see him as a nuisance as an audience is because he stops Daemon from having his way. All right? I'm going to end it with one final point. Otto does nothing outside the realm of the expected actions of nobility for the time being. He's ambitious, but every nobleman is ambitious. His actions aren't inclusive to himself. He marries his daughter to the king, which Corlys tried to do as well. He finds her a good match with a good person. Now, Vizzy does commit marital, what he does with Alicent, but that's, normal for the society that they live in, which says more about the world that they occupy than, Otto's actions. All right? Also, he does it a lot more subtly than by having a child explain to a king when she'll be available to make children, which is oversharing way over the top. All right? Now, despite serving his own interest by the marriage, every other piece of advice he gives is sound and reasonable and good for the realm. No two ways about it. He's not a half-bad dude. The scene at the dinner party is particularly adorable. All in all, I quite like Otto, and he is way too villainized for no reason whatsoever. And what time is it? Yeah, I knew it was going to take this long. Criston Cole is next, and I'm particularly excited about Criston because I love him as a character, but I feel like they've given him a massive injustice. Cheers!